rest of this story.
This is Just Dubs with John Dickinson.
Dickinson's an underrated talent, 100%.
On KNBR 104.5 and 6.8. Streaming live at KNBR.com and on the KNBR app.
Ball, James. Oh, a silencer. LeBron James hits a three with 1:08 left.
LeBron James doing the job against the Warriors again on Thursday. That in Los Angeles. From Los Angeles on to Chicago, where we come to you and welcome you into Just Dubs on this Saturday morning. Here on KNBR, the sports leader, 808 KNBR. It's John Dickinson with you as always, and with you from Chicago. That's right, from Chicago, where Jimmy Butler is expected to make his Warriors debut tonight at United Center after the big trade that went down Wednesday evening, right before the Warriors were set to take on the Jazz. What a wild week it has been since we have been on the air in this time slot with this show. Great to be with you here for the next couple of hours on KNBR, talking some Warriors basketball as the Warriors make the big move. Had a couple of potential big moves in play. Looked like Jimmy Butler was going to be off the board for Kevin Durant. Then Kevin Durant said, I don't really want to go back to the Warriors. They pivoted back to Jimmy Butler, and they wind up getting the deal done on Wednesday, as we mentioned, with the Warriors acquiring Jimmy Butler from the Miami Heat, introduced at his press conference in Los Angeles, which we were on hand for on Thursday. And as I mentioned, on to Chicago as we come to you live here for the next couple of hours. And Dubs OT tonight from Chicago. It's the best Dubs coverage in the Bay, and it's all right here on the sports leader. So 808 KNBR is the number, 415-808-5627 to give us a call or shoot us a text here on this Saturday morning. Appreciate those of you starting to file in here on YouTube and Twitch. And look, I think there's a big-time excitement in the air here that's been palpable, I think, since Jimmy Butler entered the building down in Southern California on Thursday. I mean, you never really know how things are going to shake out, how long it's going to take to get everything in order in terms of a trade and what the expectations are and all of those different things. But it really does sound like the Warriors are lining up with this move to make a little 31-game run to try and see how far they can get. And they're going to start in a hole based on the horrific loss against the Jazz on Wednesday, and then they lose again to the Lakers on Thursday. And it's basically go time now with 4 games to go on this road trip. Warriors then hit the All-Star break, come out of the break with a game in Sacramento, a couple of home games, including the Jimmy Butler Chase Center debut, which is going to be 2 weeks from tomorrow, with Klay Thompson back in the house and Anthony Davis, and Andre Iguodala is going to get his jersey retired. There's going to be some wild times here in the next couple of weeks for the Golden State Warriors and for Jimmy Butler as they look to get him acclimated and look to bring some juice to this Warrior franchise that really, for the most part, even with Stephen Curry, even with Draymond Green, even with Klay Thompson up until last summer, the juice has really been missing. I think for the last year and a half. It was still there in the year where they lost to they beat Sacramento and then lost to the Lakers in the playoffs. A lot of it had been gone because of the Draymond Green punch and Jordan Poole subsequently being ineffective and ultimately traded in that season. But that was still a team that made the playoffs, figured out a way to get in, figured out a way to win a playoff series, figured out a way to be competitive to the tune of 6 games against the Lakers before they ran out of gas. But since then, from the Jordan Poole, Chris Paul trade to the way last season played out with this team, getting off to a decent start a year ago, but then under 500 and fighting back toward 500 at this point a year ago. And it's just been this malaise, really. And lack of commitment to, are you going in on the young guys? Or are you going in on trying to get a second star? I think the Warriors were always trying to go in on getting themselves set up for a second star. acquisition, but then they just couldn't find the right deal. They would balk at some. Other teams would try to get a little bit too much in a deal with Paul George and Lauri Markkanen. They shifted their focus again, has been widely reported and discussed, back to Kevin Durant. That doesn't work out, and they wind up with Jimmy Butler. I think the malaise of the last year and a half to 2 years ends tonight. And look, it doesn't mean that this team's going to suddenly go 20-11 between now and the end of the season. I think that's what the hope is. I think the hope is that they can do that and have the potential to be in the mix for a play-in spot to where they can advance, a high-end play-in spot, right? Maybe a 7 or an 8, where you get a couple of games to try and win one or get in, or hell, make a run where you can be good enough to figure out a way to get all the way to 6th. Either way, I think an energy has come to this Warriors team based on the fact that they've chosen a direction, and they didn't mortgage the future. There's a ton of risk involved in this whole thing, but they got their guy that's going to be their guy for the remainder of this season, and he's going to be their guy for next season. And they now have this opportunity, as we've discussed so often in the last couple of days, to see how good you can be with the team that you have, but then you also are evaluating for the offseason and seeing exactly what needs to be done in an attempt to try and build a championship caliber roster for next season. And there's no guarantees in this thing. And there is high risk in this thing. Jimmy Butler, when he's motivated, is a dog. He's a guy you want to ride with. He's a guy that will bring an intensity. He's a guy that will, I think, demand a high level from everybody that he's on the court with and of the organization. And I think, giving him the extension, the contract extension, means he's likely to be happy. And I don't know, I as much as there may have been some trepidation from some in the Warrior hierarchy as to the fit in the locker room and as to whether or not a deal was worth it, I get the sense here over the last couple of days that the vibe has been positive, the vibe has been energetic, and the vibe has been, let's roll and see how good this thing can be here for the next year and a half. So 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627, as we continue to react to the Jimmy Butler trade. He is set to make his debut tonight. Now, a quick bit of news on that. The Warriors holding shoot-around over at United Center as we speak, and I'll be over at United Center later on in the afternoon, and we'll have Dubs OT here from Chicago coming up later as well. But quick note, Jimmy Butler unable to participate at the Warriors shoot-around, even though the trade is official and has gone through, and he's a member of the Golden State Warriors and all of that. But until every player involved in the deal officially passes their physicals and is cleared, he cannot practice with the team and or play. So while he is in line to play, the Warriors intend for him to play. The expectation is that he will play. Unable to participate in the Warriors shoot-around this morning here in Chicago, and all of the other players, once the physicals and things are cleared, then he would be available to formally be available to play. But no, not on the injury report, planning on playing. Expectation is all of that, and we're going to be all over it for you here on KNBR. A couple of questions to start the show. We're going to have Greg Silver join us coming up at 10:50, and we'll get his thoughts on everything the last couple of days, and really where I wanted to go with the show today. And we're going to play a lot of the Jimmy Butler press conference sound from Thursday night in Los Angeles. But where I really wanted to start is it kind of hit me the other night, really Wednesday night. And we talked a lot about the game on Thursday and in Dubs OT and how things are going to work out. And we'll get into the combinations and different things, all of those details between now and noon here. But I'm a little bit surprised, and everybody's certainly entitled to their opinion. This is not a no-brainer move, a no-brainer guaranteed to work move. I think we could debate the fact whether it was a no-brainer move for the Warriors to make the move when you look at who's coming in and Jimmy Butler, who went out, the assets and players and people that the Warriors were able to hang on to in the deal, the assets and players and people that they have to include in future deals in the offseason to look to continue to improve and build this team around Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond Green for this 1.5 to 2.5 year stretch that they try to get one more shot at being a title contender. But I was surprised at how many haven't liked the trade. And the initial reaction felt just as much negative as positive. I'd say it's probably in the 50-50 range. But the question I would ask here on KNBR to our friends in the YouTube chat and watching on YouTube and Twitch and the Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line, all of that, the question I would ask is, knowing they could not get Durant, and that was its own drama that played out in the lead up to the trade deadline, which led the Warriors away from Jimmy, onto Durant, away from Durant by his call, back to Jimmy. Were the Heat and Suns going to just completely cut the Warriors out and do a Durant-Jimmy Butler deal? Sounds like Kuminga would have been gone had the Warriors been able to get Durant. It's been reported here in the last couple of days. But knowing you couldn't get Durant, knowing Kuminga would have been in the deal, would you rather have had them do nothing? Like that to me is where the surprise comes from in terms of how many don't like the trade. And again, this is, Kuminga was not in this deal. None of the other young players were in this deal. There's no 2028 unprotected first-round pick that went in this deal, or 28 and 30 unprotected, top 4 protected first-round picks, whatever, that ended up going in the deal. And so while this move is not a guarantee to work out, what was the other move they could have made, Durant aside, because he took himself out of the consideration, that would have given them a better chance to make something not only of this season, but next season as well? Because to me, it's twofold. It's the watchability standpoint. And let's be honest. I mean, we were heading down a road with 31 games to go to where if the Warriors had made no move, and maybe they were less willing to make a Vucevic move because they got the Jimmy Butler deal done. And if they had not gotten the Jimmy Butler deal done, even though Vucevic is a different caliber of player, a lesser caliber of player, they would have felt the need to at least do something. And then maybe traded a couple of expiring contracts plus second-round draft capital to get Vucevic, so it would at least be something. And Andrew Wiggins would have remained and all of that. But I don't think that trade was going to be a needle mover. I do think it would have given them a small boost. I do think it would have helped the fight continue here into the depths of February and past the All-Star break and the dog days of March, where you can start to see the finish line and all of that. But I don't know that he would have truly been a difference maker to the level of getting the Warriors from, say, 11th above maybe 9th or 10th in the conference. It certainly would have helped them get in. And I don't think the Warriors were getting in. Maybe not even getting into the play-in tournament had they done nothing. But we were also entering this watchability. You do nothing. And I think there was a frustration on the nightly and even on the night of the trade with just the horrific loss with the 11-point lead and 3 minutes to go in Salt Lake City, that this team was trending toward having as good or better a chance at dipping to 5 or 6 games under 500 post All-Star break as they would have had to make some kind of a run. And I think that was trending toward unwatchability. That was trending toward, it was trending toward just being irrelevant, which I think is something that the Warriors definitely do not want to be. And now they are relevant. Now there are And again, I'm not talking about talent. I'm not talking about this team's going to win games at the level of this other team. But there is a juice to the Warriors. And I can tell you firsthand from being in Los Angeles, and I'm in Chicago right now, I can tell you firsthand there is almost a 2018, 2019 juice to just the attention that's surrounding the Warriors based on the Jimmy Butler move. And I think that's something that Steph Curry and Draymond Green and even Steve Kerr thrive on. Like, all eyes are going to be on them. All eyes are going to be on the Lakers and Luka, and that's going to be number one. And there are some other really good young teams and defending champions and teams on the come that are really trying to get back. In your Bostons and your Denvers and your OKCs and Clevelands and all these teams. But the Warriors, I feel like, put themselves back on the map. They were on the map, but they were only talked about in the context of, well, Steph Curry's around and what are they going to do to try and help Steph Curry win? Or can they ever make a move to try and help Steph Curry win? Well, they've made the move. So now they're back on everybody's radar. And I think for this sprint to the finish and 31 games to go, good, bad, or indifferent, it's going to be fun. Like, there's going to be it, and sometimes, and it may end up in a crash and burn type of a scenario. But you gotta think the risk was worth it, to be sure. So 808 KNBR 415-808-5627. It's just Dubs with JD John Dickinson from Chicago here on this Saturday morning. Warriors and the Bulls tonight from United Center, and Jimmy Butler expected to make his Warriors debut. And of course, we're going to have Dubs OT for you after the ball game from Chicago. Let's get to the phones. We'll get it started here. Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line is open. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube and Twitch as well. We'll get to our friends in the chat, Greg Silver to join, but Kevin in San Mateo gets us tipped off here on this Saturday morning on the Sports Leader. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Butler's injury prone. He only averages 56 games a year. He's not going to take this. He's not going to take this team to the finals, maybe even not the playoffs. The West is too strong and young. Just like the Giants, they should start their rebuild.
Okay, well, at least I appreciate you giving me an alternative, because I think that is truly the only other realistic alternative. Like, doing nothing to me would have been unacceptable. And look, I hear you. I mean, Jimmy Butler's been a selective. It hasn't even. It's been injuries, but it's also been needs rest days, and I think at times because he was growing unhappy with the Heat organization, he came up with some. Yeah, I'm just not feeling well. I don't want to play in a back-to-back, or I don't want to play in this game or that game. I think the Warriors are counting on the fact that unless he's legitimately injured, and you mentioned the fact that he has had issues with injuries from time to time, I think he's playing every night. Like, I don't think there's going to be this half-ass, needs his PTO type of Jimmy Butler. And some of that, I think, has been construed as injuries over at least the most recent time leading up to the suspensions these last couple of years in Miami. And I'll also say this, and I'll agree with you. I mean, there's no guarantee, Kevin. I mean, you're right. He's not taken into the finals this year. Like, I'll just say that. But I think there's something to be said for giving yourself a chance that didn't exist at all. And you can say, hey, maybe it's a 5%, 10%, 2% chance. And it sounds like you're in line with that. But it's a chance. And the other young players are still on this roster, and they didn't give up, like I said, 4 draft picks on into the future. So if the time comes to where they do have to do that rebuild that you're talking about, they're still, I think, going to have the ability to do it. But when you say do the rebuild, does that mean you would trade Steph Curry? Because to me, that's the only way that you truly are starting the rebuild to the level of where it would would need to be successful. To me, you cannot do both. You cannot keep Steph Curry for the next 3 years and then, oh, we're doing a rebuild around Steph Curry. Like, that's the part that doesn't work. And if you're not going to do that because Steph Curry wants to play and finish his career as a Warrior and he's an all-time great and he gets to choose if he gets to stay, then you have to kind of go all into the best of your ability without completely stripping yourself of any kind of future assets or young players.
Did the Warriors give up a first-round pick for this?
They gave up a protected first-round pick in 2025. So it's going to be, it's top 10. So if the Warriors are terrible, let's say Jimmy Butler gets hurt, he's terrible. They go 10 and 21 in the last 31 games. They end up in the lottery. They get the 8th pick. Well, they'd keep the pick. If they get the 15th or 16th pick, which is more likely where they're going to be, then the pick would go. That pick would go to Miami. That's the only pick.
Yeah,
only first.
I mean, Warrior fans will be really whiny if they trade Curry, but if you trade Curry and Green and get a bunch of draft picks, look at the Lakers.
Yeah, well, again, they don't want to do that. They don't want to tap out right now. They don't want to completely tap out with the guy that's the greatest player in franchise history. I mean, Kevin, look, I give you credit, man, because truly you stated the only logical option if you're like the half-assing days needed to be done, right? It's either you're really tearing it down, and really tearing it down means Steph and Draymond, or you have to try to do everything you can to be as good as you can. And look, Steph has a say in this too. It's not just Warrior fans who obviously wouldn't love Steph Curry being traded, but Steph, for everything he's brought to the franchise, it's not an official no trade clause because only LeBron and Bradley Beal have those. But it's basically hey, we're going to do right by you. If you want to be here, you're going to be here. So he would almost have to ask out if the Warriors were going to look to make that kind of a move. Kevin, good phone call. Appreciate the call. Thank you for getting us started here on this Saturday morning.
All right.
808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. It's just Dubs. We're off and running here from Chicago. Let's go ahead and take a quick timeout. We'll come back. We'll get into the YouTube chat. We'll hear a lot from the Jimmy Butler press conference from Thursday throughout the course of the show. Get everybody set up for Jimmy to look to make his debut tonight in Chicago. It's the Warriors and the Bulls. I am on hand. We got a special edition of Dubs OT tonight from Chicago, and there's a lot to get into here. Again, knowing they couldn't get Durant, what would you have rather had them do? Nothing? What was another move that could have been made that would give them a better chance to make something out of this season and next season? Because I think if they had done nothing, the remainder of this season is kind of worthless. It really, and then the pressure of what can you do? You've struck out at every turn continues to mount into the offseason. And look, I stuck up for Andrew Wiggins. I like Andrew Wiggins. I'm probably a bigger fan of Andrew Wiggins than most in terms of his play and things that he brought to the table. But you look at what the Warriors gave up, and they didn't mortgage the future. And is it a perfect deal? No. But I think the days of inaction had to stop. And I think it sounds like, Joe Lacob was the guy that really put this thing over the top and said, nope, going to do it. Going to pay him short term, make him happy, and see if you can cobble together one more run. And maybe in 2 years, we're talking about tearing the whole thing down. All right, let's pause quickly. We'll come back. 808 KNBR. It's just Dubs here on the Sports Leader.
This is KNBR, and this is Just Dubs with John Dickinson, streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
I think our personalities are going to be fine. I would like to say that I am a winner. I haven't won it, but I would like to call myself a winner. I do want to win it being a championship. And as far as playing with Steph, I mean, everybody knows he's the greatest shooter in the world, greatest shooter in history. Makes my job a lot easier. I probably got a lot more space out there. But more than anything, I think it's always going to be a team effort. We all got a lot more space out there. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, Stephen Curry going to give Jimmy Butler more space to operate, and Jimmy Butler is going to be a secondary playmaker to give Steph Curry more space to operate. Do the Warriors have enough at other positions, I think, is probably going to end up being the greater question, at least in my mind, as we welcome you back here. Jimmy Butler set to make his debut tonight in Chicago. It's Just Dubs, JD from Chicago here on the Sports Leader. 808 KNBR 415-808-5627 to join the conversation. Is Jimmy Butler a winner? I would say yes, when he wants to be. I mean, that is so much a part of the factor. I mean, Jimmy Butler can carry and did carry. And look, some of that was Eric Spoelstra, and some of that was the Heat culture going back to 2023. I think that the 2020 team was a pretty good team, the bubble team that the Heat ended up with in the finals. I mean, Jimmy Butler, though, in reality, when motivated, when engaged, when happy with his situation, and so much of it really does have to do with that. And that in and of itself is a risk. But when he is in the right space, he's absolutely a winner, and he's a guy who, as the best player, has been able to drag, I think, lesser teams, albeit well-coached lesser teams, to playoff series wins and a couple of NBA finals in the Eastern Conference. Now, the West is not the East. You have to account for that. But, and Jimmy's getting older, have to account for that. But the Warriors should be getting a pretty fresh Jimmy Butler this year because he's barely played. And even when he has played, I don't know how much he's really been going hard for Miami in between and around all the suspensions. So I think the Warriors are getting the winning Jimmy Butler by virtue of the contract and everything else. I think Jimmy and Steph work. I think Steph and Jimmy work. I think Draymond works. To me, the most interesting aspect about this from a basketball standpoint is, do the Warriors have enough of the other types of players on their roster that can help make this thing successful? Because I think you could make a case, and I did on Wednesday night when I implored the Warriors to make a move, on Thursday when they ultimately didn't make another move. I still think this team lacks shooting they just lack shooting, and they're going to need it. And I think the unfortunate part about this team between now and the end of the season, yeah, they needed a stretch big. I also think they need another guard or a wing that could shoot. And somebody that you could pair with Jimmy Butler that can stroke it. Somebody that you could put with Butler and Kuminga when they're going to be on the floor together. Because that's another question I have about this. Look, I would have made the deal. I think it was a good deal given what the Warriors gave up, what they didn't give up. Gives them a chance to try something different and see if at the very least they're more entertaining. But I also would say bluntly that I think the Warriors from a basketball standpoint over the final 31 games are going to have a lot of the same problems that they've had in the first 51 games of the season as Butler plugs into that Wiggins spot. Are the Warriors going to be better in close games with Butler and Steph? I would say logically you could make the case that's the case. That would be true. It's not a guarantee. By the way, a little bit of NBA breaking news here this morning. The Clippers are going to sign Ben Simmons. I mean, that's been reported for the last couple of days, but formally the Clippers are going to sign Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons got his buyout and will be headed to the Clippers. But that to me, from a purely basketball standpoint, the concern that I have is more about the rest of the construction of the roster, enough shooting to be able to make the Jimmy Butler Draymond combinations, the Jimmy Butler Kuminga combinations when he comes back from injury work. It's not about Steph and Jimmy. It's not about Steph and Jimmy and Draymond. It's not about Jimmy's motivation. I think the Warriors are basically paying Jimmy Butler to be motivated, and he will be. And he's proven when he's happy, he will be motivated and be the guy. So all of that said, our question du jour here between now and noon, and Greg Silver's going to join us coming up as we get closer to the top of the hour. Knowing you couldn't get Durant, would you have rather had him do nothing? And also, where are you on the fact that they didn't move the expiring contracts of Kevon Looney and Gary Payton II? Because that whether it was Vucevic, and look, I don't know if Vucevic is a Jimmy Butler style player, but he's a skilled guy that can shoot the three ball and score a little bit on the interior, and I think take a little bit of heat off of some of the other lineup combinations that the Warriors are going to have to play. Quentin Post gets his NBA contract, no longer a two-way player. Quentin Post has fallen back to earth a little bit the last couple of games. How could he not? But Quentin Post, I think, is somebody that is, does he stand up in the Butler Kuminga lineups? Does he stand up as somebody, if you start Steph, let's say Buddy Hield tonight, I would imagine the Warriors still start Buddy for shooting with Steph, Jimmy at the 3, Draymond at the 4, and I would guess Quentin Post at the 5, because I think you need that shooting. And look, Jimmy's much more of a scorer, locked in. I know his numbers are pretty similar to Wiggins this year, but that was with Jimmy basically not given a rip. But I don't know. I think shooting and floor spacing, those things are probably, from a basketball standpoint, the most important things. A couple of things on the Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line here, and then we'll get into the YouTube chat. 707, JD just felt like it's a desperate move. Warriors got older and more expensive. Wiggins was a glue guy and the only two-way player and loved by his teammates. JK's injury has cost us 4 to 5 games. That forced this overreactive move. I think there's a little bit of desperation to it. They definitely get a little older, and there's some risk involved with that. They do get more expensive in the short term, but I think the one thing that the decision the Warriors made in acquiring Butler is that they also were saying that they weren't going to be able in the next year and a half to basically get another younger star. Tried Durant, tried Markkanen, tried Paul George. And by the way, I'd much rather have Jimmy Butler than Paul freaking George at this point. I'd probably rather have Andrew Wiggins than Paul George at this point. I'm not making the same claim about Jimmy Butler as it compares to Wiggs. And Wiggs was a glue guy. The problem is, look, in a perfect world, you'd have Wiggins and Jimmy Butler. In a perfect world, and it didn't work out this way because of the salary structure, but in a perfect world, you would have been able to trade Kuminga for Jimmy Butler and keep Wiggins and other salaries, like in a perfect world. But Wiggins is a better player than those other players. He's a better player than Kuminga. And he has the salary that allows you to get close to matching the deal. So in a perfect world, yeah, you'd have Wiggins. You'd want to have Wiggins. And Wiggins is a glue guy and a two-way player. I mean, Jimmy Butler's a two-way player. So you're trading one for one. And as far as JK's injury, one or two. I think there's 1 or 2 games they win. There's games they should have won anyway. Also like the Utah game and the Toronto games. I mean, those are games they've lost with Kuminga. It's not 4 or 5. It's maybe 2. But I think, again, I do not think the Warriors could continue. The Warriors could not say, "Yep, Draymond's back, and you're bringing Kuminga back, and those are your moves." Kuminga isn't ready. Kuminga, again, I always talk about this with Kuminga. Kuminga has 5 or 6, 8 to 10 really good games, and people in their minds, it's like they think it's the whole season. It's like Kuminga plays great for 3 games, and people act like it's 30. Like Kuminga played well for about, I don't know, 7 to 10 games. And look, he's going to have to get reacclimated now also. Not saying he can't, not saying he won't, but I think all the momentum he was starting to build, and we saw this last year, he was starting to build, we saw it each of the last 2 years. He started to build momentum late in the season and then got injured, and then he never got it back until right before he got injured again in December. He was playing exceptionally well last year toward the end, and then he got hurt, and then he was out, and the Warriors played well without him at the end, and they couldn't get him back in for the play-in game, and he was pretty bad in the play-in game, as everybody was, and then coming back into this season, it took him till like January 4th to get him cooking again. And now you add Jimmy Butler. I'm fascinated by that combo because Wiggins and Kuminga at times worked, with Wiggins at the 3 and Kuminga at the 4. Other times it didn't. I think I look at what Jimmy Butler does to be successful, and I don't think it works with Kuminga unless Kuminga is going to go back to, and I think he's going to have to go back to getting his off of everybody else's actions, and it's basically only dunks and layups. It's the occasional corner 3 if teams dare him to shoot it. Like it's the put your game in a box Kuminga. It's not the stretch your legs and try to do it all Kuminga. I think we almost go back to that as the baseline, and I don't know that he's necessarily going to want to do that, given the fact that he was starting to spread his wings again, and given the fact that he's going to have to get himself a contract again. So that's all going to be fascinating. That's all, and maybe it works out, but I would not expect immediately, whenever he comes back after the All-Star break, the same Kuminga that we've seen. 415. JD, just trying to see how a We Believe run lines up. Do you think Pods or Moody can be a Monte-esque slasher? Definitely not Moody. He's not a slasher. And Pods is not really a slasher either. I mean, I think Kuminga could maybe be that guy if he doesn't try to do too much. But how often is he going to be out there with Jimmy? Again, there's a lot to sort out. The 2 biggest concerns, I think, from a basketball standpoint, shooting. I still don't think the Warriors have enough shooting with this group, and it's how does Kuminga fit now, knowing that he's still going to be around. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line is open. 808 KNBR is the number. As we come to you from Chicago, where Jimmy Butler's set to make his debut tonight, and we're going to be all over it. Best Dubs coverage in the Bay here is on the Sports Leader. All right, YouTube chat. Joe Schmo, how many minutes for Jimmy? How many points tonight? I think he's probably going to play close to 30. I mean, he said he was in shape. That was another question from the press conference the other day, and we'll get into the press conference in more depth coming up in the 11 o'clock hour after we talk to our buddy Greg Silver. But I think he's going to play 30, close to 30, high 20s to 30. I think the Warriors are going to want to maybe slow ramp him up, but I think Jimmy, this is another part of the Jimmy dynamic. I think Jimmy's going to be like, nah, I'm good. Play me. Like, you're paying me, play me. I think that was part of the issue with Miami was he didn't feel like he was rewarded with the contract off of what he had done for the franchise. And now I think the Warriors have kind of, at least in the short term, they've paid it forward on that contract. So I think they're getting a Jimmy that's getting like, let's go get it. let's. So I think that he's going to be somebody that's going to want to play. And at times that has not always been the case, and that would be another potential concern. Good morning to everyone in the YouTube chat. Enrique Rivera, as we kind of scroll through at the top of the hour. Good morning. Andrew Castro, happy Jimmy Day. I think a lot of people are feeling that way in the Bay. Good, bad, or indifferent. It's something fresh. It's something to be excited about here for these last 31 games. Holy lessons. JD, is Curry cooked? No, I don't think Curry's cooked. But I think Curry for the last 2 months has been dealing with this knee thing, and he's been dealing with defenses drape all over him. And I think he's had the weight of trying to keep this team alive on his back. And he hasn't, for the most part, been able to do it. And there's been a lot of bad games. I mean, sometimes he has been able to do it, but there's been a lot of bad games mixed in there. Trier 24, can't wait to see Jimmy Buckets play tonight. More from Holy Lessons, adding on to that last comment. Curry's my favorite player. It saddens me he's not close to the LeBron level. Well, he's been on the LeBron level in terms of carrying teams through the years. I mean, yeah, you look at what LeBron's doing at 40, and it's unbelievable. But it's different. It's that, being a guard is very much different than being a guy that's 6'8", 6'9", and controlling a team and the physicality and the strength and the things. They're just different players. The sturdier wing types are always the guys that have the ability to do that for a little bit longer. Andrew Castro rebutting, how is Curry cooked when he's being double and triple teamed? Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. That's pretty much where I'm at. Rick Killeen, appreciate you, Rick. Think they run the offense through Jimmy and give Steph a break. I mean, Steve Kerr, one of the first things he said, Jimmy's going to play the non-Steph minutes, that's great. That's one way to let Jimmy do what Jimmy needs to do in a style that may not directly relate to the Warriors and the way that they've played through the years. However, I think they have to let Jimmy play the way Jimmy's comfortable and can be successful when Steph Curry's on the court. That to me is they have to pick their spots to let Jimmy operate with Steph on the court and let that help Steph. Like, it's not just, it's easy to say, it's like with Schroeder. It's easy to say, well, he's going to play the non-Steph. Well, okay, that's fine. But you're also going to have other bench players out there at that point. Like, other teams also know it's coming when Steph's not on the court. So if Steph's not on the court, you know the Jimmy Butler ISO offense is coming, and then you're prepared for it as a defense. So to me, there has to be a little bit more of a blend of how you look to run things. It can't be, oh, Jimmy Butler's out there with Steph, and he's going to run split action. I mean, you can do some of that. But, no, they're going to have to run some of the plays they'd run for Wiggins where he'd get the ball in the left wing and look to drive and go. And, look, that's more in the construct of their flow type offense. But they got to let Jimmy operate and create, because that's part of why they went and got him. Man, Holy Lessons is really worried about Curry early on here. Curry's not a closer. Well, Curry's a closer. Come on. But they are banking on having another guy who can close in Jimmy Butler. And I think Jimmy Butler being on this roster down the stretch should, in theory, help Steph Curry close. That's the first thing I thought about. When this trade goes down and the Warriors then trick the game away at Utah, and they've given away so many of those games. And the first thing I thought about was, yeah, if Jimmy gets an extra bucket here or another defensive stop there, it's all about one or two possessions in a lot of these games. And as long as the Warriors are still good enough at putting themselves in the positions to be in those close games, which I think they should, then I do think they're going to get better in close games. I do think Jimmy Butler's going to help them get better in close games, especially the ones that they absolutely give away. I mean, it's one thing to, all right, back and forth game, you lose. But the Warriors have had 8-point leads with a minute to go in these games. It's not like back and forth can't execute or luck, right? The 50-50 games, you should win half of them, you should lose half. No, the Utah game does not fall in the category of, it shouldn't even have really, I mean, it should have been considered a clutch game, but you're up 11 with 3 minutes to go. You win that game. Like, that's not a clutch game at that point. Like, that's a game you're controlling. Like, you win the game. You win in Toronto when you're up 6 with whatever it was, a minute and a half to go. Like, those are I think the other thing where Jimmy has the potential to help is ending scoring droughts. And there's times where Jimmy can be a volume shooter, and it can be a little inefficient, and he's missing jumper. Like, there are times where he will look a little like Wiggins, where it's like he's missing jumper. But the thing that he does well is he gets himself to the line. People are already fretting about that, by the way. We got Kyle Haar in our San Francisco studios. We got both Kyles, Kyle Chung, Kyle Haar. Warrior fans are already panicking about the Jimmy Butler. Is Jimmy Butler not going to get calls now because he's on the Warriors? Is that a thought, Kyle, that both of the Kyles, is that a thought that either of you have had to this point? Kyle Chung's like, yeah.
No, but actually
Okay.
it is a good thought.
No, but now that you bring it up,
Yeah,
JD.
I was like, wait, that kind of makes sense.
But as the Laker game's playing out, Warrior fans are just freaking out about, well, welcome to the Bay, Jimmy. You ain't getting any of the calls you used to get now.
Yeah, if Jimmy was on the
go
Lakers,
ahead.
he would be going to the line 20 times a game.
So yeah, let's not fret about that before we need to. Alpha, JD, excited about the rest of the season. Need to get Kuminga back so we can see what we got. Yeah, that's going to be huge. The buyout options. We'll get into the buyout options. Enrique, Ben Simmons is not somebody that I ever thought was going to be J Boogie 510. I didn't think Ben Simmons was somebody that was going to be in the cards, and he's going to the Clippers. Marcus Smart. I like Marcus Smart, but they need shooting. Ben Simmons a perfect fit in this. He is if you didn't have Draymond Green. I mean, there's too much. I like Ben Simmons' game, but he doesn't fit with the Warriors right now. Andis, Bulls are a good team to make your debut against. No defense. Yeah. And I think being in Chicago where Jimmy got everything started helps. I think there's always a good environment in Chicago, even if the team stinks. They sell out every game, and it's a major city Saturday night. Like, I think it's a good debut game. I really do. And yeah, no defense. And it's kind of a get comfortable, in theory, although again, you lose to Toronto and Utah, there's no game you can't lose. So let's not, I know it's a new era. And so maybe that changes a little bit. We'll start counting how they trick games away maybe it's 0-0 now with the Jimmy Butler era. But I agree with the Andis. I think Chicago is a good team. Andis also wondering what I was wondering, who's physical is holding up the deal. Sometimes the other part of it too is the players get, I think it's 48 to 72 hours. And I should know, I think it's 72 to report from the time of the trade. It's 48 to 72. I'm not sure if it changed with the CBA. So players do get a couple of days to kind of get their affairs in order. And sometimes it could be, hey, I'm on a plane tomorrow. It's kind of up to the preference of the team and the player to work out. You get trade, like Jimmy Butler, for example. I mentioned this on Dubs OT the other night and on with the Dirty Work guys. Jimmy Butler was in LA. I guess he's got a house in LA, or he was chilling in LA. And when he was awaiting his fate with the Heat, was he going to Phoenix? Was he going to the Warriors? Whatever. He went up to San Francisco to do his physical with the Warriors doctors and all of that. Flew up Thursday. So the day after the trade, flies up, does his physical, gets everything signed off, and then flew right back down to LA to be with the team, join the team, do the press conference. Everything gets formed, and then he's with the team as they go to Chicago from LA and Milwaukee and Dallas and Houston. But players it's between 48 and 72 hours to report and then get their physicals in order, and then everything, becomes official. Although the trade has become official in terms of the deals. But yeah, guys can't participate until everybody else gets rolling. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. It's Just Dubs with JD, John Dickinson, here on the Sports Leader. A lot to get into. Greg Silver's going to join us coming up on the other side. And then we'll also hear from Jimmy Butler as he addressed the media on Thursday. I was on hand for that in Los Angeles. And we'll come back. More calls, more texts. Appreciate the YouTube chat. Right here on the Sports Leader.
live from downtown.
Hurry, way downtown. Bang! Bang!
This is Just Dubs with John Dickinson on the Sports Leader, streaming live at KNBR.com and on the KNBR app.
This is a great choice. And the best part about everything is I never say anything. So nobody actually really knows what's really going on because it never comes from my mouth. So out of everything that's been going on, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be able to play basketball again, meaningful basketball at that. So I always leave it at that. I'm able to go and go out and do what I love. And I'm happy that it's for an organization like Golden State.
All right, Jimmy Butler addressing the notion that he was the Warriors' second choice, obviously with the Warriors looking to get Kevin Durant first, and that the Warriors were Jimmy Butler's second choice, preferring to go to Phoenix upon leaving Miami. They wind up together, and it's all going to start tonight in Chicago, where I am currently. Just Dubs with JD, John Dickinson from Chicago. Warriors and the Bulls tonight, special edition of Dubs OT from Chicago as well. And again, is it a marriage of convenience for the Warriors and Jimmy Butler? Regardless of how they got to that point, they are here, and I do think the Warriors are going to get a motivated Jimmy Butler. All right, let's get out to the Uma guest line. Is that still a thing? The Uma guest line? Let's get to the Uma guest line. And bring in our buddy Greg Silver, who's not going to be joining us via video this morning. He's out and about. Maybe he'll join Dubs OT tonight with the video stream. But Greg, what's going on, man? We got Greg on the line.
Yeah, we are good to go. What's going on, JD? The Uma guest line is still a thing. I talk about it every single day, so I can assure you you're good there. Yeah, actually out near the Embarcadero right now, near the ferry building, seeing a group of people filming a little dance in front of the quad. They got a couple of different jerseys on, so I almost wonder if this is some kind of all-star promotion or just another Saturday here in San Francisco. But regardless, it's good to be out. It's good to be out of the rain. And how's Chicago, man?
Yeah, Chicago's great. It's kind of dreary, but no snow or anything at this point. Might get a little snow, I think, a little bit later, a light dusting. But yeah, quick trip. See Jimmy tonight and do Dubs OT and then back to the Bay early tomorrow to get ready for the Super Bowl and all of that and the remainder of the trip from the home studio back in the Bay. But Greg, give me just the pulse of what the last couple of days have been for you. I mean, from Durant to and potentially, Kuminga being gone and what that trade would have looked like and how that had the potential to help the Warriors, from Durant being a no-go to Jimmy Butler being the guy now. And I started the show with this and asked it as the question at the top. I've been surprised at how many have not liked the trade. It's been a lot more split or to the negative than I would have anticipated, considering how on a nightly basis the frustration level has been from the Warrior fan base that the Warriors have just been so inactive. So it looked like it was going to be Durant. It wasn't. It became Jimmy after it looked like it was going to be Jimmy and then wasn't. Do you get the sense that people are happy about this, and were you happy about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, this last week was the kind of week that you live for doing sports talk radio because of how many moving parts there were and rumors that seemed to maybe not be rumors, and starting all the way with the Kevin Durant talk. I mean, at first we're bringing up the subject as, yeah, it's a long shot, but, I guess it's possible. And then it felt very real for a second that a multi-team deal could be in place. Bradley Beal was holding up any kind of movement in Phoenix. I was surprised that Matt Ishbia in the end was even ready and willing to push the button to send Kevin Durant elsewhere, and that KD himself is the one that stepped in and sort of nixed the idea of a reunion in the Bay Area. I'm not sure what it really came down to with KD. I mean, he is a complicated individual. I know he and Steph get along great. I feel like any kind of tension there was with Steve Kerr seemed to be pretty resolved and all good at the Olympics. I know that's a different kind of context, and I don't know how much of it was just not wanting to be teammates with Draymond Green again, maybe not wanting to leave Phoenix. Maybe he felt happy where he was. But in the end, he was the one that stepped in and shut it down and didn't feel like it was the time. And I think the Warriors did the right thing, not saying, okay, we're doing this anyway, and bringing in a disgruntled superstar who's had his own age and injury history. So, yeah, my reaction to the Butler trade when it came down, it took a second to kind of gather the thoughts. I was getting all these texts of, what do you think of the trade? And I was glad they made a move, first and foremost. I mean, you and I were both very much in the camp that standing pat here was not an option. And when you look at what other Western Conference teams in this kind of 7 to 12 range had done, the Lakers and Mavericks made a big shakeup. The Spurs went and got De'Aaron Fox. They are much better now, although they lost to the Hornets last night. But the Warriors lost to the Jazz. So we don't really have a right to say anything out here in the Bay Area. And the bottom line is, JD, and I kind of said this the day after, that I think I'm happy with it in the sense that, yes, it's a desperation move. There's no doubt about it. But I don't think it's reckless. I mean, of all the concerns we've heard from Warriors fans, right, is Jonathan Kuminga going to get shipped off at the age of 22? And there's always going to be this what if on the player that he could be, or is Steph Curry going to have to finish the end of his career just carrying the team when he's had his own age and injuries with the tendonitis and the thumb and the ankle? Like, that's starting to catch up to him. And defenses are very, very aggressive about pressing and making his life difficult. And the Warriors have not really had a second option to go and make them pay. So they absolutely had to do something. But all the while, those four young guys of Kuminga, Moody, Podziemski, and Trayce Jackson-Davis are still very much on the team. So with this roster as currently constructed, if the Warriors were bound to stink in the year of 2028 or 2029, well, guess what? This move doesn't really impact it. Jimmy Butler's on a 2-year deal. Steve Kerr, Draymond Green, Steph Curry all got their contracts there. So I think in that sense, it keeps that famous line of the 2-timeline plan. You didn't blow everything up, but you did do a move that could absolutely be beneficial to Steph Curry when I think if you watch these last couple games, he needs it more than ever.
And they still have those players to use in future deals, and they still have more draft capital that they were prepared to use, reportedly, in a Kevin Durant deal. I mean, it sounds like a couple of more picks and Kuminga would have gone in the Durant deal. Now, I get it. That's for Durant, and he's a different player than Jimmy Butler, and he's at a level without the baggage that came with the Jimmy Butler deal that would have required that. But I also think it keeps the door open for the Warriors to continue to do more, and I think they're going to have to continue to do more. Obviously, it can't happen until the summer now, other than the buyout market. But I think part of it is you keep your assets now so you can use them later. It's not necessarily you keep them now because you're just going to keep them forever. But you make the first move, and then you figure out what you've got and what you need. And then at that point, you also figure out, I think in the last 31 games, who is expendable in this thing, who fits, who's expendable. And I think there may be some surprises, right? It may, hey, I don't think this guy's going to play well, and he does. And then it's, oh, okay. And then maybe somebody else you think is going to play well with Jimmy Butler in the mix doesn't. And that shapes the moves that you look to make in the offseason. What on that note, and we can get into some of the details of things that I've kind of jotted down as concerns. One thing I don't believe is a concern is Jimmy Butler's motivation. Is Jimmy, but like I don't think we're getting PTO Jimmy. I really don't. I think the Warriors are going to get a guy that wants to play, wants to compete, wants to, as he told Melissa Rowland of Fox Sports, bring hell to a lot of people. And so I think that energy is definitely going to be there. And I think it engages Draymond more, and I think it engages Steph more.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I'm not worried about PTO Jimmy right now. And we had Monty Poole on with Papa and Silver the day after the trade took place. And he said it well. He said Jimmy Butler's career has been defined by these exorbitant honeymoons and then these really messy breakups. And right now, the Warriors are focused on the honeymoon phase, and I think they kind of have to be, right? Like, Jimmy Butler is someone who needs to come in and bring a little bit of fire. And I mean, look, we know this from having watched the team for over a decade now in this iteration of Steve Kerr, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and formerly Klay Thompson. Guess what? They're all terrible losers. Jimmy Butler is a bad loser. We need a little bit in the Bay Area of this losing is unacceptable mentality. And that's not any shot at Andrew Wiggins or Dennis Schroeder or the guys that left. I think that the role players were really committed to the team. I think they played hard, and that goes for the ones who are still on the Warriors and those who got sent away here at the deadline. But I think this Jimmy Butler, Draymond personality clash concern, it's going to be there always, and it has kind of this element of explosiveness at any time. I'm not worried about that in the early stages of Jimmy Butler being on a new team. And they need someone who's a little bit of a pest. They need someone who's not afraid to talk trash and back down. And here's this, JD, too. We talk about the Warriors need a number two. Well, Jimmy, I think, is still a great number two because we've seen him be a number one on a team that got to the finals multiple times. Now, it's a different team, and he was a little bit younger, but he could be a great number two for sure. And when we talk about Jonathan Kuminga, I think way more highly of Kuminga as a third offensive option than I do a second offensive option, which he essentially had to be this year, depending on what you got on that side of the ball from Andrew Wiggins. So that's not a concern for me. It's not the perfect move. There was no perfect move to be made, but they had to shake things up in some form. And, you know, Jimmy Butler, let's just call it what it is. He's a pain in the ass. He's willing to be a pain in the ass. And maybe the Warriors need that down the stretch of these close games when I don't think teams fear them in the way that they used to.
I do think they need it. I think they need the infusion of what he brings to the table, without a doubt. I'm still concerned. I'll give you some concerns. I want to hear yours. I'm concerned that this team still does not have enough shooting. And look, I think Jimmy, we consider Jimmy as he comes to the Bay and evaluate this Warriors roster. And you said it as a two next to Steph. I mean, it really is, I think, more of a 1A. I mean, and we'll see, we'll know very quickly, I think, where, how much Jimmy's been sandbagging here in the this season and kind of going through the motions based on how he comes out and plays in these I think we'll know by the All-Star break here with 4 games to go just what level. So I think it gives him a 1A option in addition to a 2. And I'm not worried about the Steph, Jimmy Butler, Draymond trio. What I'm concerned about is, do they have enough of the other skill sets on this roster that can make it all work for it in these 31 games? I think they're gonna see what they don't have and figure it out in the offseason. I'm concerned about shooting, and I'm also concerned about, we can go one at a time, I'm also concerned about the Kuminga Jimmy Butler fit. I don't initially think that those two fit together well on the court, because Jimmy Butler plays in a manner that's kind of like Kuminga wants to play, but Jimmy Butler's actually going to get to do it, I think, at times. And it almost puts Kuminga's game back in that box of, only take the layups and dunks, only get your offense off of what's created for you by the, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but I don't necessarily think that's something that he, as he comes back from this injury, is going to necessarily want to ease into. And Jimmy's a streaky shooter also. He has games where it's 8 for 20 and 8 for 22. And so I worry overall if this team has enough shooting and skill as they're currently constituted, even with Jimmy Butler being an upgrade over Wiggins.
Well, probably to no surprise for you, JD, we had a very similar set of concerns when this happened. I mean, shooting was definitely the first thing that came to my mind, and then lineup fit was a more kind of layered thought process I was going through my head. But again, I think this is where, if you have the time, go and listen to that interview we had with Monty Poole this week, because I asked him about the lineup and the fit and how that's all going to go together because, I listed just 5 players that I would really like to have on the floor, not necessarily even as a 5-man unit. But when I think Steph, Jimmy Butler, Jonathan Kuminga, Draymond Green, Kevon Looney, well, on paper, I love all those guys, being out there together. But that is not a lineup that's going to work in terms of position, spacing, and shooting. That just gives you nothing outside of Steph unless you're getting a random hot spell from Jimmy Butler or Draymond Green. So, Monty kind of outlined it in this way, that he thinks Jimmy Butler can play a little bit of point forward. So he thinks that Jonathan Kuminga, Draymond Green, and Jimmy Butler are sort of going to work off of each other's minutes. And what it might lead to is Draymond playing somewhere more in the 20s, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing for the Warriors if they want to preserve an aging body who's had the calf tear and the back issues and just the natural wear and tear of being a premier defender in this league for over a decade. You can decrease Draymond's minutes a little bit, and then maybe Kuminga gets a little bit of more minutes. He said, I don't think there's going to be those 3 out there together on the floor at the same time, but there's going to be a little bit of this triangle kind of rotation as it fits. Now, one thing that we all know is that Steve Kerr loves offensive spacing and always has when he's had these great shooters since he came to the team in 2015. Does that mean that Quentin Post is going to get more minutes and maybe it opens up a window for Jonathan Kuminga to play the small forward? Yeah, possibly. I mean, I don't know if Post is going to be a 25 minutes a game kind of guy. We've seen him struggle defensively against some of the better teams. That's to be expected from a 52nd pick in the draft who has spent most of his time in Santa Cruz. That is absolutely no knock on what Quentin Post has brought to the team, but you can see the value of the skill set there. So yeah, I don't think there's anything that's a perfect fit as far as the lineup goes, but I do think, knowing the competitive nature of a Jimmy Butler, Steve Kerr is making a lot of money to go and solve these problems. I think there's a possibility that things can work. I mean, Andrew Wiggins is a piece that is lost. It hurts losing him. He did bring you a lot of stability this year, but you have to be able to give something up to get something in a trade, and you weren't going to end up with a Jimmy Butler if you weren't able to get, or if you didn't sacrifice someone the likes of an Andrew Wiggins. So you might lose something on defense. You might gain a lot on offense. And let's face it, JD, after that 12-3 start, losing D'Anthony Melton and Buddy Hield going cold, I mean, the offense has just been as bad as we've seen it in a long, long time here.
Yeah, and I think they – unfortunately, Wiggins was going to be in any deal that the Warriors were going to look to, any big deal that the Warriors were going to look to make on the salary and the position that he plays. I mean, we were talking about it a little bit earlier. In a perfect world, you would have Wiggins and Jimmy Butler, but you don't have enough other assets to do that. And obviously, the Warriors still value Jonathan Kuminga as somebody that at a minimum is a future asset, at a maximum is somebody that they signed to a big contract and winds up contributing to this team, the rest of this year when he comes back from injury and next year and maybe even beyond the Steph, Jimmy, Draymond era. That's still obviously very much on the table. I have my thoughts on, I said earlier, I think the starting lineup will remain in the short term with Buddy Hield at the 2, Steph, Buddy Hield, Butler, Draymond, and I think Quentin Post. I think still because although he's come back to earth a little bit, I feel like that will be the initial. I also, in saying that, Greg, I think Buddy Hield is probably the least Jimmy Butler type player on the roster. So, like, if you're looking for guys that you may get a little of that pissed off at a teammate, Jimmy, that Buddy would be up high up on that list. But I still think you need the shooting, and that was how they were rolling with Wiggins here of late. And now you also kind of need Podziemski to be the backup point guard, and I think that's a little bit harder to do if he's going to be in the starting lineup as the 2 guard. And I'm with you and Monty. I do think there'll be some point forward for Jimmy, and that will allow some other lineups. But how do you think they play as far as the 2 guard spot here?
Well, I know Warrior fans don't want to hear this at all, but Buddy Hield is going to have to continue to get some capacity of minutes, because even as much as he's been slumping, he still has the potential to go on these shooting heaters. And if you give him open looks, he could very much keep you honest. And playing alongside Steph Curry, you're kind of forced to be in a position where you need someone else who can shoot the ball, and bringing in Jimmy Butler will help you in a lot of ways. It's not going to help you in that way. I think Monty put it as a reputational gravity with Buddy Hield, because that is the strength of his game. And yeah, I'm with you. If there's a player on the team that is not going to mesh well with Jimmy Butler, it probably is going to be Buddy Hield, because of the defensive struggles and everything on that side of the ball. But Podziemski has played a lot better since coming back from injury. I know he didn't shoot it well against the Lakers, and he's got to do better than 2 for 6 at the free throw line. So that's all aside. But yeah, they need ball handling. I mean, the reason I like the point forward comparison is because Kyle Anderson wasn't getting a lot of minutes, but that was something he could do for your roster. Draymond Green's been injured. And when Draymond and Kuminga and Podziemski were out, you had a lack of point forwards. You also had a lack of ball handling. So Podziemski, just on the basis of being able to handle the ball, I don't think he has any choice but to be the backup point guard at this point. So really looking forward to seeing how it goes. And I mean, they're just going to hit the ground running, JD. You look at these next 6 games for the Warriors, and 4 before the All-Star break. They got to win this one in Chicago tonight. I know that the Utah game was weird because you made these trades a half hour before the game, but guess what? Utah has 12 wins, and you still blew an 11-point lead with 3 minutes left. That just can't happen. The Lakers game, that was a nice fight there in the second half, but that first half was disgusting, and the transition defense was non-existent. I know LeBron was going on a little offensive heater, but you made a 40-year-old man look like he was running up and down the floor with ease, and that just can't happen either. So, yeah, it's weird. The adjustment period you don't get a lot of, but you got to win this game in Chicago, get back to 500 before the schedule continues to get tough and on the road. And who knows what we're going to get from Jimmy Butler, conditioning-wise, offensive production, but he does have to bring the dog mentality. He does have to be an absolute pest, and he's got to light a fire under the butts of the Golden State Warriors beyond just Steph or Draymond.
Yeah, and I think for those two, it's there for sure. The rest of it, I mean, guys that I think do have the ability to play. I think Moses Moody is somebody that is impacted positively by having another creator. I think the less you ask Moses Moody to do in terms of offensive creation, the better player that he is. I think if he ends up able to just get in a comfortable spot where he gets playing time and can just hit open threes off of kickouts, and if guys are able to close out on him, drive by him as he that have those be his drives when he gets closed out on, and look to make plays in that way. Like, I think Moody's the one guy among everybody that I think maybe benefits the most among the younger players. I think Podziemski, with he's out there with Jimmy, it hopefully would help him to not feel like he's got to do too much. I think given the nature of, I don't know, Thursday felt like a Podziemski, it almost felt like earlier in the season where it was like he thought he needed to do all this extra stuff to help him, and because they were shorthanded, and he just he rebounded, he did other things, but his offensive game I thought was a little bit off. What makes, final one for you, Greg, and I know we're up against it, Kyle. What makes the remainder of this season successful for the Warriors, if for you?
Getting into a playoff series, whether that be through the play-in tournament successfully or having enough success here in this final stretch to go and get a top 6. But getting into a playoff series, I think, is the realistic expectation for success at this point. If you can have a healthy and motivated group led by Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Kevon Looney, who's got a lot of experience in there. I don't know. Look at the top of the West. I mean, if you face Denver in the first round, that's probably a more big picture concern going against Jokic. But OKC is a force, but the Warriors have beaten them twice, and they're still really young. Houston is also a team that the Warriors have gotten the better of, mostly until the foul from, 60 feet away from the basket in the NBA Cup. And then Memphis is a team that the Warriors have also taken down in the past, and they're young. So if you can get just the intimidation and experience factor of Steph, Jimmy Butler, Draymond, and a supporting cast. I'm not saying they're going to go and win a playoff series, but you wouldn't make a young team at least stop and sweat about it for a second, especially if you steal one of those first two on the road. So that's kind of what I'm looking at as the big picture here.
Yeah, I mean, if you get into a playoff series, you ended up doing more this season than you did last year, and now you've got Jimmy Butler. And while you know that it's still not perfect, there are still other avenues in play here to look to continue to improve because the Warriors didn't give up all of their assets in this trade. Greg, great stuff, my man. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the game. We'll see if we catch up tonight on Dubs OT, my friend.
Absolutely. Enjoy Chicago. Big thanks to the Kyles, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks a lot. Our buddy Greg Silver joining us, of course, Pop and Silver 10 to 2 every day here on KNBR Monday through Friday, and the sports leader and a contributor still to the Dubs OT and Just Dubs community, and will be here from now until the end of the season. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. We're overdue for a quick timeout, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll come back. We'll hear more from Jimmy Butler and a lot from the YouTube chat as well, as the Warriors and the Bulls are coming up tonight from Chicago. That's where I am, and we've got you covered all day long and into the evening on KNBR 104.5 and 680, the sports leader.
Dub Nation, this is the real and inside story on Warriors basketball. Just Dubs with John Dickinson now continues, streaming live at twitch.tv/thesportsleader.
For myself, I'm so happy to be playing basketball again, honestly. Before an organization like this one, with some hellified talent that we have, I'm glad that I get the opportunity to get here and help get us to winning and do something special. I think that's why I'm here, and I will do my best to do what everybody wants, and that's to win a championship. I mean it.
The expectations are back. Again, maybe not this year. I think it's a tall ask to say, hey, championship this year. I think the Warriors still have moves to be made in the offseason that would get them back to that level. But the one thing we're going to find in the next 31 games is how close or far away the Warriors are to having the potential to be a championship contender. Jimmy Butler, though, in the right mindset. And I think that's a healthy first step for the Warriors as Jimmy looks to make his debut for the Warriors tonight in Chicago, and that is where I am, as we've been talking about throughout the course of the show, in Chicago, headed over to United Center after the show here, and Jimmy Butler set to make his debut, although did not participate in Warriors shoot-around today. The expectation is still that he will play a couple of physicals, or all physicals for all players in the deal need to be done before players can participate in practices. Shoot-arounds are obviously games, even though the trade can be announced as official, and the expectation is that he will be able to have all of that cleared and be cleared to play before 5 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Central Time, when that game tips off from United Center tonight. 808 KNBR 415-808-5627. Appreciate Greg Silver for joining us. Our question on the board today, one of many, what makes the remainder of this season successful for the Warriors? I think getting into the playoffs is a no-brainer at this point. That would make it successful. It would also be a rung higher than the Warriors were last year. I still think it's going to be difficult for them to avoid the play-in tournament. I think they are probably going to have to, if they make the playoffs, do it via the play-in tournament. As you look at where the standings sit right now, Warriors are going to start this journey a game under 500. And, man, I mean, you look at the games they've kicked away, and you can't dwell on it, and you can't go back and get them back. But even just the game at Utah, or the game at Utah, the game in Toronto, I mean, just those two. Forget about all the other ones where they've blown double-digit, near 20-point leads. Warriors get those two in their back pocket. They're 27-24. They'd be eighth right now. They'd be eighth right now, and a game and a half out of seventh right now if they just had those two in their pocket, and they'd be adding Jimmy Butler. So they've got to make up some ground. They start on the outside looking in of even the play-in tournament. They're 11th, tied with Sacramento. Right now, 10th is the same record. The Kings have the same record as the Warriors. Shocker. I feel like they've had the same record as the Warriors for the last 2 years straight. But 25-26 is what it takes to get in the play-in. Warriors play the Kings 2 more times, including the first game after the All-Star break. And the Kings currently have the tiebreaker, obviously, by winning the first 2 games head-to-head. San Antonio is 2 games behind the Warriors. They obviously added De'Aaron Fox. They're in 12th in the Western Conference, and Portland has won 6 in a row to get themselves into the mix. Basically, I hadn't been mentioning Portland, Utah, or the Pelicans, but Portland's only even a half game behind San Antonio at this point. And as Greg mentioned, San Antonio last night lost in Charlotte. And, yeah, so they won in Atlanta in the De'Aaron Fox debut. They lost in Charlotte in game number 2. And so we'll see a step forward and a step back, 2 games in for the San Antonio Spurs with De'Aaron Fox, and Stephon Castle had an excellent game. Also a little bit of not breaking news. We don't need the breaking news sounder, but Brandon Podziemski, Kyle. Brandon Podziemski has been added to the Rising Stars game. Omitted, I think, because of, well, he wasn't having a great year before his injury, but also the injury kind of took him off the radar. But Brandon Pajemski, he was notable. I wouldn't call him a snub, but he was notable not on the Rising Stars roster, considering the fact that he had a really good rookie season. He has been added for Cason Wallace, who is unable to participate due to injury, a right shoulder strain, Cason Wallace of the Thunder. So Brandon Pajemski will be a part of the All-Star Weekend, which is next weekend in San Francisco. Brandon Pajemski on hand for that. But yeah, you look at the standings, and I think making the playoffs is a successful season. Again, I was just looking at the teams. Phoenix damn near lost to Utah last night, came back, rallied, won. They're a game up on the Warriors. The Mavs are a game and a half up on the Warriors, 27-25. And this is not a Mavs team now that you can count on getting their act together. The Mavs with Luka coming back, you thought, all right, well, they're going to get their act together. They basically had the same record they do right now a year ago, and they got on a run with Luka and Kyrie down the stretch and ended up avoiding the play-in tournament and all of that, got to the NBA Finals. But with the trade and Luka going to the Lakers, Dallas is not now a lock in my mind to avoid the play-in tournament. The Clippers, 28-23, but they've dropped 3 in a row after they had gotten themselves all the way up to 5th. They're 7th currently. Minnesota has been playing better of late. They've won, I think it's 7 of the last 8, but they had a home loss to Sacramento earlier this week. But they're up to 6th right now, and I think Minnesota. We'll see. They've been kind of underachieving all year long, but to get to 6, it's a 3.5 game difference and a 3 game difference in the loss column. So doable, but again, frustrating, I think, if you're the Warriors, because of the games that they've kicked away at this point. All right, more from Jimmy Butler coming up here. Let's hear one more right now, actually, and then we'll get into the chat real quick, and then we got to take a quick timeout before we wrap it up. A big part of this thing for Jimmy is just where he's at mentally. Everybody's wondering about his motivation in all of this, and Jimmy addressed his little hiatus away from the Heat and the fact that he's ready to roll.
I'm at a really good place mentally. This mini break that I didn't want but had during the year, I got to spend more time with my kids, more times with my loved ones, to reflect on a lot. But I'm in shape. I'm ready to go. I've been training. I've been running up and down, laughing, smiling, and having fun. But now I get to do one of the things that I love more than anything, and that's to compete.
And that's the big part, ready and in shape and been working out and all of those things as he prepares to make his debut. Because there is a sense, and I felt it on Thursday, and I felt it from talking to people. There's a sense that the Warriors really are. They're trying to get 6th. And they think if things go well, you don't know how well it's going to go. But I think they view this as if you need to win 46 or so to get to 6, 45, 46, that this team has the ability to go 20-11 in the remaining games. Now that'll only get you to 48, 21-10. That gets you to 45, 8 over. That gets you to. I think 46 is probably about the ceiling, but I think they believe that they have the ability to make that kind of a run if they're able to get off to a fast start. And so Jimmy, though, I think is the player that gives him the best chance to get off to that fast start, because I think this remaining road trip, starting with the game against Chicago, and Greg Silver mentioned it when we had him on, it is massive that this team gets off to a win tonight, see what happens in Milwaukee. They got to get a couple of these games of the next 4, and tonight's the most winnable on paper. And then they got to come out after the break and really get after it. Sacramento, that Dallas game is a 50-50 game at home now. Going to be a lot of emotion and energy in the building for the Jimmy Butler debut. Then you play Charlotte before you go out on the road. This team's got to make that little mini push here. I think it's the 4 games remaining on the trip and the first 3 before the next trip after the All-Star break in Sacramento at home against Dallas. Those 7 games, you got to get a 5-2 going in those 7 games. and that might mean even being 2-2 here on this trip. All right, more from the chat here real quick. Erwin Kwong on the trade. Good to hear from Erwin. No costly picks went into the trade, just short-term cash over the next 2 years. Yeah, a lot of short-term cash. A lot of short-term cash. Another one here in the chat. Vince C. Wiggins is better than Jimmy. Wiggins is not better than Jimmy. Even at 29, Wiggins is not better than Jimmy when Jimmy's motivated and engaged. And they will. I do think they're going to get the motivated, engaged Jimmy, as we've talked about. Andis Brown, this essentially is going to be the Warriors roster going forward, minus the expiring contracts. We'll have to move big pieces now in order to adjust the roster. Yeah, I don't think that the other young players are necessarily going to be off limits if the Warriors show that the Curry, Butler, Draymond trio is working and others fit into their respective roles around him. Again, to me, it's a 31-game audition for everybody else on the roster to determine their level of fit next to those three. Those three are not going anywhere. Steph, Jimmy, Draymond aren't going anywhere. I think everybody else on the roster immediately when this season ends and they are eligible, they all become players that could be moved. I don't think that's off the table at all. I think in a perfect world, it's the new big three. I'm a little reluctant to say that, but it's Steph, Jimmy, Draymond, and it's, in a perfect world, Kuminga fits. And he comes off the bench, and they play two of the three together between him and Draymond and Jimmy, and it all works out. And Podziemski continues to be the Podziemski that he was before the Laker game, surrounding the injury. Moses Moody, I think, he comes in and plays well and makes open shots, and Buddy Hield maybe plays a little bit less, but is effective. That's the deal, as far as I'm concerned. But I don't think that the Warriors are married to this roster beyond the next 31 games as basically being the roster. And I still think, as much as they love Kuminga and believe him to be a future star, there's also going to be an issue of what level are you going to be able to pay Kuminga before it really starts impacting your tax here, with the money that Steph and Jimmy Butler are going to be making, and also trying to fill out the roster with other role players, because they're going to have to do that in the offseason. So I would disagree a little bit with Andis on that front. I do think they're going to be willing to move. Mike O, Kuminga should be starting, don't you think? So, JD, or do you like him off the bench? I don't know where I don't see a spot for him to start. And look, he was coming off the bench before he got hurt in the games where he flourished. There were some starts mixed in there when other guys were out, but he was basically coming off the bench then and flourishing there in that role. And so, no, I would anticipate he comes back off the bench, and if he starts, he has to start at the 4. Again, it's like nothing changes in that. Like, I do not see, and I know some people have said this, I haven't seen a lot of it, but I do not see Curry, Jimmy, Kuminga, the 3, Draymond, and even with Quentin Post, I don't think that's going to be a lineup that the Warriors are going to look to use as a starting lineup. I do not think Steve Kerr's going to tinker with playing Jonathan Kuminga at the 3 over the final 31 games. Maybe as they build the roster out for next year, they look to do more of that. But Jimmy Butler, Andrew Wiggins was the 3. Jimmy Butler's the 3. And yes, maybe a point forward. So if he plays with Kuminga, it's going to be him, Kuminga, Draymond, and Draymond. It's going to be Draymond at the 5 with 2 guards, Steph and another guard. That's basically what it's going to be. So, and I don't think the Warriors, maybe they get to a point where they start that group, but that's the only iteration in which I see it. And again, I think that in some ways limits Kuminga or forces him to put his game more into a little bit of a box. All right, quick timeout. Let's come back. We'll wrap things up on the other side. Some final thoughts from the YouTube chat. We'll set the table for tonight, and Dubs OT from Chicago. It's all coming up right here on the Sports Leader.
Just Dubs with John Dickinson keeps rolling. Streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
Jimmy, are there any regrets on how this whole process played out?
Only one. I just opened my coffee shop in Miami and can't go there no more. So we're going to have to figure out a way to get one in San Fran.
Coffee coming to San Fran. And yes, we already had the conversation. Somebody's going to get to Jimmy and be like, hey, don't call it San Fran. It'll happen. Thursday wasn't the time for that. But yeah, the Jimmy Butler, what is it? What is the Jimmy Butler coffee called again? Kyle, do you know off the top? It has a Butler coffee. Jimmy Butler. It is Big Face. It's called Big Face. It's called Big Face. I knew it had Big Face coffee. It's the Warriors are back, man. Like, I don't know if they're gonna win. But like the Bleep Show, like number one story, Warriors across the NBA is back to be sure. So yeah, looking forward to it. Big Face Coffee coming to San Francisco, and yeah, that's his only regret. Only regret. No regrets on anything that has to do with the Heat. All right, we're gonna go. Kyle Haar's choice on some of the chats. There was one that I wanted to mention. Well, let's do Rebels first, and there was one that I caught, and then it's all Kyle. Yo, JD, what's the buyout market looking like? What do the Warriors need to do? Who can they target? Well, Ben Simmons is off the board. I don't think the Warriors had any interest in Ben Simmons, but you look at, and I'm bringing up my list of names on the buyout market here. Bojan Bogdanovic is a name. I think he's somebody that could really help the Warriors in terms of shooting. I would have liked Bruce Brown, although it sounds like Bruce Brown's going to end up staying with the Pelicans and potentially maybe signing there. Malcolm Brogdon, I think, is an interesting name. Malcolm Brogdon is somebody that the Warriors almost picked the year that he came out. And I think Milwaukee moved up. And was it Milwaukee? Or Indiana moved up. Indiana. Now it's escaping me because he's played on so many teams. But Malcolm Brogdon was somebody that the Warriors were gonna pick, and then they got moved in front of in that draft, and ended up not getting him. And so Malcolm Brogdon, I think, as a combo guard, is somebody that if he comes available, there would have the potential to be some interest in, but he's injury prone, obviously. So I would probably put him and Bojan Bogdanovic at the top of the list in terms of the guys that you'd be looking at maybe moves for. Vince C., the person who said Wiggins is better than Jimmy Butler, adds, nope. They will not be winning more close games because there will be less close. I think there might be less close games because the Warriors are winning more games. I don't think there's going to be less close games because they're going to be getting blown out. Because look, I like I said, I think Wiggins is a good player. In a perfect world, you'd have them both. All right, Kyle Haar, rapid fire. Let's get 5 or 6 chats here in the final 2 or 3 minutes here, and we'll head for United Center and Dubs OT tonight. Andis Brown, Wiggins' personality, good fit. Low-key, was liked in the locker room. He was loved in the locker room. There's no question. And that, I think, is why the Warriors allowed so much compassion in terms of the missed time in dealing with the personal issues and everything that was going on with his pops, as his pops was battling and ultimately passed away. We'll see with Butler. There's no question. His personality is too big for the locker room to not change. That is well said. And I think short term, and I've said this a lot, could it be a good thing? That's the question. I think the Warriors have become stagnant, and I think they needed to grow to be more comfortable being uncomfortable. So I think regardless of whether it works out, it may flame out. It was worth the shot. All right, what else do we got? Kevin Knox probably signing a 2-way after the buyout after buyout shopping. Yeah, Erwin. Yeah, Kevin Knox is playing great in the G League. He's somebody that could come back. I don't know how much of a role he would have, but I think he's somebody that you'd like to keep in the program. I think that's a good call. FL Dubs fan next year have to be the oldest or second oldest team in the league. Steph 37, Dre 35, Jimmy 36. September. How many games do they play together? How many games do they play? Period. Well, Steph for the most part has been healthy in terms of playing games, and Draymond they've tried to manage. That's a great question, though. Target, I think the target for all three of them together, a target number would probably be 55 to 60, I think would be the hope. And obviously, maybe the individual numbers are less than that for some of those guys, but you're getting, two of the three of them are playing together and the like. That is absolutely a risk, but for 1 year, it's a risk that I think the Warriors felt was worth taking because the alternative was the same things that we've seen the last 4 months and all of last season. Good question, though. Holy Lessons. Sorry, JD, I keep having to drop off. Is Curry cooked? No, he's not cooked. He's not cooked, but he is showing signs of age. He is. I mean, let's not sugarcoat that. He is less consistent. And some of it is talent around him. Some of it is age. Some of it's the fact that he's banged up. Father Time is undefeated. Holy Lessons. But no, he's not cooked. All right. 2 more, Kyle. All right. Back to Erwin. Thank you to Andrew Wiggins for being a good Warrior and bringing a chip. Left a better player than when he arrived. That's a real good one. That's a real good one, Erwin. And the final chat of the show, Mike Val, JD, your show is great, man. I didn't even know. Well, if you don't know, now you know. So let's and we appreciate this. Just Dubs is growing. The community at the Saturday morning community is growing here. The Dubs OT community is exploding after every game, and we're looking forward to another big crowd continuing to grow there on the radio and on YouTube and Twitch. And just a quick note to everybody tonight. I know a lot of our regulars, and we're going to put this out on social media tonight. We are airing a game on KNBR tonight. The NBA game. What is it? It's the Knicks and Celtics we're airing tonight. So we're going to be on whenever that game ends. The Warriors game might end a half hour or so. Warriors game's going to end around 7:30. That game ends a little bit closer to 8. Because I'm in Chicago, we're going to start a little bit later tonight. After the game, we're going to start maybe about 45 minutes or so after the game ends, roughly 30 to 45 minutes after the game ends tonight. We're not going to go YouTube only, so I can get down to the locker room post game. We've got that little gap, so I'll be able to go down to the locker room for Steve Kerr's press conference and hopefully Jimmy Butler's press conference as well, so we can get you the sound from all of that, and we can get you the video on social media for all of that as well. So a little bit of a later start tonight. Don't panic. If you're in the chat, we'll get it going, and Kyle, keep everybody updated on the timing. We'll make sure we send out the links and all of those things. But we're really excited about where things sit for tonight's show and the Jimmy Butler debut. So for Kyle Har and Kyle Chung, I'm JD. We'll talk to you tonight from Chicago on Dubs OT. It's KNBR 104.5 FM and 680 AM San Francisco, a Cumulus Media station and the sports leader.